Welcome, everyone, to the Big Six podcast, where we discuss the biggest and best stories in college football. I'm your host, Chris Cheng, and joining me, as always, is my co host, Rudy Tamarkio. The boys are back in town. It's been a minute, Rudy. How have you been?
It's been a hot minute. It's
I
been
know.
a lot of travel on the road. I just got back a day late from Grand Isle, Louisiana. Sport fishing championship season is underway, and as cool as it is to be on like ESPN Plus and do some like reporting stuff behind the scenes, it's hard to get a podcast in with the season underway. So just good to be back.
Yeah, so just to fill some of you guys in, the reason why we've been gone so long is I didn't want to move this show forward without Rudy. I wanted to get him on here on our schedules for a couple weeks, just warning, aligning. Rudy's got a big boy job now. He's traveling all over. He's mixing and shaking hands, kissing babies, doing it all over the country. So it's kind of hard to lock him down into one spot. So moving forward, just some big changes coming to the channel. Do not be alarmed. Rudy is not going anywhere, but you may see some videos in the future with just me solo dolo. Hopefully we can just do this together. But come season time, come football season time, Rudy's going to be here back in his usual spot on a regularly scheduled basis. But we just wanted to update you guys with that. Also, I'm going to be dropping an email site at the bottom, an email at the bottom in the comments, because we would like to actually start doing a mailbag with some of you guys. Maybe there's some questions, some story ideas that we're not covering that you want us to cover. We would love to hear from you guys. So check the comment section below, check the description below. I'm going to have an email that you guys can email address that you guys can email and send us any of your questions, comments, concerns, something you want us to cover, something you thought we need to go back and revisit. Send it to us. But let's get things started off, Rudy, with probably the biggest story for us this week. We got to talk about Jackson Cantwell committing to Miami, the number one recruit, not the number one recruit in his position, but the number one recruit, the 6'8", 325-pound lineman out of Nixon, Missouri, choosing Miami over Georgia and Oregon. What are your initial thoughts? How did you take it yesterday?
Don't you love when the experts say that there's like an 80% chance that he's going to Georgia? And all
Yep.
you see is how happy he's been with Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal and his visits on campus and seeing him from, my seats last season. No, that's a big dude. Look, anytime you can get the number one offensive lineman recruit in the country, and also bolster what already is probably the strength of your offense is your offensive line. Can't say enough about it. That's where it starts. That's where winning happens. That's where you protect your quarterback. That's where you recruit your quarterbacks. That's where you recruit your skill position guys. It all comes from there. So when you bring in the number one guy in the country, look, whether they pan out or not, because Miami has had a few swings and misses over the years with number one overall by position or, top five overall recruits. I think what I find funny is that in terms of like highest recruited players of all time, the one that historically has been the very, very top is DJ Williams.
Yeah.
Back when the star services weren't really that well known at the time, but like consensus number one, like best guy coming out was DJ back in like 1999 or 2000, whenever it was that he came out of De La Salle in California. Other than that, you could think of some other guys that kind of were. That's the last one that I could think of Miami really hitting like a home run with talent wise. Because when you think of names like Willie Williams or Arthur Brown, other guys that were like top five overall recruits, it just unfortunately didn't end up panning out. It wasn't like they went somewhere else and was successful. It's just one of those where it's just that's tough about that age. So I think now in this new era with recruiting services where really if you're number one consensus across the board, it usually means something nowadays. So fingers crossed he stay healthy because that should be an anchor for the offensive line for years to come.
Yeah, this guy's a beast. I was semi following him during the season because I remember he visited and attended. I want to say it was either the Duke game or it was one of the later half games in the season. And I remember seeing him, and I just remember this really tall guy. Pictures with Mario and what's the O line coach? What's his name?
Alex Mirabal.
Alex Mirabal, and Mirabal in itself is a short stature kind of guy, which is really always funny. I always think like one of the shortest guys on the coaching staff is coaching the biggest guys on the team. But I kind of seen him visiting. Said he had a great visit here and there following. I actually didn't get back into following this kid till a few weeks ago when he kind of postponed. So he was supposed to make this announcement, I want to say about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And then he announced, "Hey, I'm going to push back my announcement by a couple weeks." And he announced an official visit to Georgia right before this visit. And so there was this huge like battle between us, Oregon and Georgia, but you kind of saw Georgia pulling away in the last couple weeks. And so it was very interesting in the last 48 hours to see some of the pundits and some of the people who follow recruiting say that, hey, I think Miami's sneaking in this, even though you're hearing a lot of reports coming out of Athens and out of Georgia saying that this is their guy and they've got this on lock. There was a lot of smoke. A lot of the big college football pundits were playing these hypotheticals of what if, Jackson went to Miami. And you and I both know that reporters, we respect our sources, so we're not going to out and put them out there, but we will definitely send the message up, right? And so a little inside baseball for any of you guys that aren't familiar with the news industry is if you see someone talking about something, that means a source has kind of corroborated it. People don't usually talk about things on a consistent basis unless they have something going with it. So I had a very good feeling going into yesterday that he was going to commit, and then just seeing him commit, and there was actually a moment where I guess the hat when he committed didn't fit right, so he kind of threw it off. And then I was like, "Wait, what?" And but then he unzipped his jacket, and you saw the Canes football shirt, and that's when I knew. I'm like, "It's a lock." Super professional kid. I love what he said. He's got a good head on his shoulders. Like I said, I'm hearing nothing but great things about this kid. So I mean, just by his measurements alone, I think he's definitely going to up the ante in the O line room. I think he's going to be coming in at a perfect time with Francis Mauigoa, probably on his way out when he's on his way in. So it'll be a nice little handoff right there. And speaking of handoff, this guy is a shot put champion. Both of his parents are Olympians. His dad is yoked to the freaking max. This guy looks like he's still this guy. If I could put it, if we could sign his dad, I would sign his dad right now because his dad is a beast. Um,
Set him up as a strength coach. Now
Literally, I
they're
mean,
just
this guy
get him under
is
Aaron Feld. Yeah.
I literally, like, was, like, watching the live stream, and I'm looking at his dad, I'm like, "How do we get his dad? How many years of eligibility does his dad have?" Because that's who I want. That guy's a beast. But joking aside, what do you think is the biggest impact you see Cantwell making?
Depth. I mean, you're talking about health is always an issue with offensive linemen. You talk about they get rolled up on certain plays. Things happen where they end up taking the wrong step. It's always getting rolled up on somebody. Like when you watch your entire line, you see they all have knee braces on. It's
Yep.
never a good thing
Yeah.
because that also then makes more of a likelihood of there being ankle injuries down the line. It's like there's all sorts of stuff that happens. Like you should wear something for protection, but you also don't want to have like yourself completely hindered in movement. So yeah, you never know. He might be one of those guys that starts day one because he's just that kind of a talent. He could be a little raw, may need a little bit of time, underneath somebody else learning the system. The term you always hear with Alex Mirabal is cross training. So just because you're a
Right.
left tackle or you're a right guard doesn't mean you're going to be playing that only position. You're going to learn how to play everything from center out. So in that way, I think you might see him work early. If Miami starts blowing some teams out, you'll see him obviously in the game third and fourth quarter, which would be really nice. And if he ends up being one of those guys that makes a huge impact in fall and spring practice next year because he's a 2026 recruit,
Yeah.
that would be really really nice to see. But it's yeah, that's where I see him kind of playing in is just in terms of depth. He might be your day one guy. That's great. You have him for a few years. If not, you got somebody who is who the most highest sought after recruit sitting right there in the wings, ready to go.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I wanted to go with it. To me, I think his biggest impact right now will be some of the intangibles off the field stuff. So we kind of kicked the show off talking about getting the number one recruit, number one overall recruit. I really want to focus in on that because Miami has gotten some number one recruits in their positions or maybe number two. But to get the number all overall recruit, you got to look at that kind of like a draft, right? You getting the first pick. And I think with having Cam go number one to the Titans in the NFL draft, and then immediately following up with us getting, Jackson Cantwell to commit as a number one overall recruit. This is a groundswell of momentum that the program desperately needs. I think with the way we finished last year, with that little bit of like, sputtering up at the end, not making the ACC championship, not making the college football playoffs, I think that left a sour taste in a lot of fans' mouths. I think in just the overall view of our program across the country, it kind of deflated a lot of people's expectations and the trajectory maybe of where the program was going. I'm not going to lie, I was a little worried with the trajectory of the program, with the way the season ended last year, and then seeing guys like I think it was Isaiah Horton going to Alabama, not being able to keep those guys. And then while not explicitly said, but the kind of the undertones of Emory Williams not panning out as the quarterback we thought he was going to be, having to go get Carson Beck, who in himself is still a question mark. Still think he's going to be good, but I think this in itself gave Miami a lifeline. You could see the excitement in Mario Cristobal yesterday at ACC Media Days, screaming in the hallway. Such a cool video. I love to see coaches to see that passion, because you know that these kids aren't just numbers to them. These are living, breathing family members that they're expanding, and it's nice to see that the program is still respected, especially Mario as a former O line player, and the program we're building. You know what I mean? With Francis Maui Noah probably going to be a first round draft pick next year if he chooses to declare, which we all think he will. I think this is going to be a groundswell for other recruits. I mean, again, a lot of people are already kind of pivoting now to, okay, who's next, right? And I think that's a great thing to look at. But I also want to kind of stay on this. Like you said, I think DJ Williams being the last one. And then I did some search. I think it was like 1991 was the last time they had like a number one overall recruit. I'm trying to think of the D lineman's name. Um, but
91 could have been, it wasn't Warren Sapp, was it?
No, it was someone else. I can't remember. I said it in the chat. I did a Google search, and God
Yeah.
bless AI. It was just like the first thing they gave us. But I'm going to say some things right now that are probably going to piss off a lot of Miami fans, but I think they're things that like you have to look at and to move forward, right? We've been mediocre at best the last 25 years since the 2002 team. We've been since you and I have attended Miami in 2003. Well, me 2004, but you 2003, uh,
4.
or you 2004 too. Also,
Yeah.
I came in my sophomore year. You came in your freshman. It's been a precipitous decline, right? With sputters here and there up. We have not been a dominant program. And this was nice to see, because you're starting to see talent that not only the country respects, but that we not only that we respect, but the country respects as well. I'm not sure if you saw this, and I want to kind of go, this is where I'm kind of going within a conversation. Next is, so he was the overall consensus number one player until he committed. Did you see how ESPN dropped him to number 3? And then there was another one. I think it was 27 Sports or someone else dropped him to number 2 or number 3 as soon as he committed. On 3 still kept him as number 1, which I love. But it looks like some other programs, some other publications have devalued his value because of his commitment to UM. What do you think that says about our program and the just the overall nature of giving these recruits stars?
Uh, do we have to use the old like tired statement of the U is back when they say that? Because they love to hate. Everyone wants to have a villain. And it's something that you've seen for a long time. It's as soon as somebody commits to Miami, their draft stock, their value, their recruitment stock, their star rating immediately takes a dip. I mean, look, Cam Ward was number one overall pick in the NFL draft. It was not close. But the story kept being, well, is Shador Sanders going to go number one overall? He ends up not even going on day one. He ends up not going on day 2.
Right.
So the entire narrative around his draft day was not even about the number one pick, who is this generational quarterback who has the right mindset, who says the right things, who does all of the studying, that is all of the things that you ask of somebody, and had these electric moments in college football and was one of the Heisman Trophy finalists.
Absolutely.
Yet it was not about him whatsoever. You see the exact same thing in recruiting all the time. You see it also in the transfer portal. So when you have
Yeah.
players that are leaving another program and coming to Miami, you saw it with Cam Ward, you saw it with Carson Beck.
Mhm.
As soon as they pick Miami and that U graphic shows up, all of a sudden it's not because they were that great of a talent. Oh, we don't know what they're going to do down there. It's something that you do see a lot in terms of like how they grade talent, because traditionally in the draft, the teams that get the players that get drafted are the ones off of the teams with the best records. So the ones that have the undefeated records and the 1 loss and 2 loss records, primarily from the Big Ten and the SEC, are the ones that are always valued as the best. Are they
Yeah.
the best talent every single year? No, but they are some of the better players on the better teams. There are talent out there, guys like Travis Hunter, for example, at Colorado, that usually fly under the radar. They didn't this year because they have the Deion Sanders effect keeping them, up in terms of like giving
Yeah.
them a national spotlight. So Hey, if that's what happens, it's just a matter of if you're Miami, you just need to embrace it and need to let people know. Like, if you're worried about players that are going to care about what their rankings are at the end of the day and what their number looks like next to the TV screen, you do want to have some of those guys because they are the best talent, but you shouldn't prioritize those guys. Your core group of people have to be the ones that say, we don't care what that is. All I care about is what the scoreboard is at the end of the day, and that I'm going to get to the next level regardless. That was Cam Ward. That's why he came to Miami. And that's who they need to keep finding.
Yeah, and you'll see this narrative online, and I don't want to make light of it because I will say another thing that'll probably piss off fans after I ask you this question. But I think, Jackson said it was development over dollars. There's this narrative that a lot of people are saying is that Miami is buying their players. The only reason why Cantwell went there is because of his NIL package he got here at Miami. What do you think this says? Whether it's the NIL, so whether you think it's dollars over development, development over dollars, what do you think this says about the current state of college football with the number one pick coming to Miami over a traditional powerhouse like an Ohio State or an Oregon or
I,
Georgia? I forgot Georgia. Yeah, I'm so over Georgia at this point. I'm forgetting about them. But
that's
yeah,
fine.
Georgia.
I would honestly say it's just look, there's always going to be some sort of an excuse that the media, that other fans, that other programs are always going to say. Like I know you have in a storyline, we'll talk about the NIL roster money in a little bit, but like this, there's always going to be something that they say. They said, "Oh, well, Miami paid their players in the '80s and the '90s. Oh, well, they did this all the time." That has nothing to do with it. I mean, if you just take Jackson Cantwell's statement on its own, development
Mhm.
over dollars, offensive linemen are not the people historically who are going to gather huge NIL deals. Unless somebody out of college has the Jason Kelsey personality already developed at that age, which, by the way, most of them don't at that
Right.
point, your NIL dollars go to the sexy positions. They go to your
Yeah.
quarterbacks,
Your
they go to your
specialties.
skill
Yeah.
position guys, your running
Yep.
backs, your wide receivers, your defensive backs. Guys like that are the ones that always get the NIL deals because they're the ones that have the more prototypical body type of somebody that's going to be the spokesperson for all these things, that's going to be the most bombastic personality. You don't get offensive linemen who do that. So, of course, it's probably going to be development over dollars because you're talking about the guys who are offensive linemen running the ship, who have eat, breathe, sleep, go number 2 in the morning with offensive line on their mind. Like, it doesn't matter what they're doing, always
Yeah.
going to have that on their mind. So, they speak nerdy offensive lineman language all the time. That's where you want to go if you're a lineman. Traditionally, yeah, that's in the Midwest because all those guys are corn fed
Corn fed.
white mans. Exactly. Like that's where you usually see them. But now they're coming to Miami because, by the way, they're diversifying everything. What Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal have done really, really well is not only are they getting the best offensive line talent, but they're forming kind of like that, not to draw too many lines back to 2001. Like the idea of like this United Nations offensive line. If you look at that line from back in the day, you had a
Right.
couple of African American guys like Vernon Carey was a backup, but you had Bryant McKinney on that. You had a Persian American in Shergo Hashi Razuli. You had a Latin guy in Joaquin Gonzalez. You had a white guy in Brett Romberg. You had a Canadian in Brett Romberg. You had a guy from Pennsylvania, Martin Bibla. Like that line had the best talent assembled from all over the country.
Yeah.
So you're looking at that now. You got guys who are Polynesian like CC Maui Noah. You've got a couple of African American guys who just left like Jalen Rivers. You've got now this guy from the Midwest, Jackson Cantwell, that's coming in. You're getting that same kind of blueprint where you're getting the best talent from all over the country and really internationally at this point to come to your program. And that's the story of Miami. So that's what made them, famous, what to put them on the map. And that's just part of that blueprint.
Yeah, and so I was alluding to saying a second thing that's probably going to piss a lot of fans off, but again, it's the truth, and we got to speak truth into to our family. As far as the current state of college football, I think we all have to just understand NIL is here to stay, right? And I think two things can be true at the same time. Yes, money was a factor, but it wasn't the factor, right? And so if you're going to sit there and try and say, "Oh, well, Jackson only came to Miami because the bag was bigger," and some estimates are saying 2.5 million. Whether it's 2.5, I don't really think it's that big of a deal in the sense that we're talking about players like Ohio State, who spent 20 million on their roster last year, Oregon, who easily spent 20 million on their roster last year, and then Georgia, who probably spends anywhere in the ballpark of 15 to 20, 22 million every year since NIL's been in play. So it's not like we're talking about, James Madison or Indiana, who we'll talk about in a few minutes. We're talking about players who all, for all intents and purposes, we all shop at the same stores, we all eat at the same restaurants, X, Y, and Z, you know? And so I think it did come down to development because when you look at the breadcrumbs of, and I think this Jackson Cantwell story is going to be a great one, and it's going to set a great precedent for Miami moving forward. Is Jackson Cantwell kept saying throughout his entire recruiting process, the most consistent, the most honest, and the most personable school that's been recruiting me has been Miami. Miami, Mario and Alex have been so genuine and so consistent with the way they recruit. Not only talking to Jackson, but his parents, establishing a vision and giving both parents and then the kid a vision for his future and where he's going to go and how he's going to develop. I think those are really important things. And then I think you look at the history too. A lot of, I mean, I jumped online today to see what the Bulldog Nation's been talking about and what a lot of Georgia fans have been talking about, and they're hearkening on this NIL thing, and it had to have been the money. It had to have been the money. And if you look, I just did like a rough estimate, just went down, just did a quick glance of O linemen that have been drafted from Georgia. Mario is not out of their league. It's not like Georgia's had like since Kirby's taken over in 2015. It's not like in the last 10 years they've had 45 linemen taken, or every year there's a lineman going in the first round or first 2 days of the draft. That's not it at all. But if you look at Mario in the last 10 years, the same time period, both at Oregon and here, the man is consistent. Him and Alex are consistent with not only getting guys in the draft, but here's the more important part, giving them, building a foundation for them to have success at the next level, right? And I think that's what Jackson saw. I think Jackson saw that, yes, money is going to play a factor, but that's everyone, again, all four of these teams, we're all starting at the same level. It's not like Oregon's pockets are hurting. We all know Ohio State's pockets aren't hurting. We certainly know Georgia's pockets aren't hurting. But I think when you look at who's going to develop, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Dan Lanning's a great coach. I don't want this to be slight at him, but I think a lot of his linemen, he's still running on Mario's guys, and he's running on Mario's steam. Those guys that went there that have been good talent, that have developed, that have been good, are seeing the allure of that, and those are actually Mario's guys. Those aren't Dan's guys. You know what I mean? And the same thing at Ohio State. Ohio State has a great O line program too. Jackson was talking about it yesterday, but I think when you look at it, Miami just offered the better package. They were consistent. They were genuine. It wasn't this, just come play for me and we can win games. There was probably some sort of connection made early on, and I think that's what Cantwell also suggested. They were one of the first ones. Miami was one of the first teams to reach out to him, and if you're not first, you're last. Um,
You want to shoot a
but
hole, by the way, in that whole NIL money situation
mhm.
anyway? Okay. Let's say the number was like, what did you say, 2.4 million, whatever it was for
Yeah, I
Jackson
think
and
it's somewhere
Miami?
between 2 and 2.5. It's somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay. How far does that take you in Miami versus 2 million NIL in Athens, Georgia, or 2 million in Columbus, Ohio?
Absolutely.
How much more of a king do you live in those markets where the cost of living is so much lower than being in a place like Miami? So if you want to talk about people spending a lot of money to come here, oh, well, they're getting more money. They're not getting anywhere near with it. If we're going to start seeing Jackson Cantwell over at Prime 112 a couple times a week, just know that that money is not going to go as far as if he was in a different market. So it's not just about the money, it's the total package of everything else. And again, there are plenty of other programs that spend more than Miami, that have bigger range than Miami. One of them just won the national championship. The other one made the semifinals of the college football playoff to play for the national championship, who won the Big Ten. So the money, Miami's not in the top four in that category. So it's
All
not
4 of
just
them
that.
were in the semis. I mean, all 3 of them were in the semis.
Exactly.
All the teams that were what we were against, and it's okay. Listen, it's okay to say yes, money was a factor. And here's the
Yeah.
thing. This is what I wanted to get to with this question. With where does it say about the state of college football? This is something we as Miami fans have to understand, and it's okay. You have to own it, like the villain role, right? Maybe we did outbid people, but good, Because what
Yeah,
that
that's what we're
says
here for.
now is what used to be done under the table, what we used to get in trouble for is now legal. And so everyone's now on the same playing field. So where do you want to go? Where do you want to go?
Yeah.
Do you want to stay in Columbus? Do you want to stay in Athens? Do you want to go to Eugene or do you want to come to Miami? Because you're going to get paid roughly the same everywhere. You're going to have good coaches. I mean, look at the talent we've developed, right? Like the talent we're bringing in. Clearly, it's not just money. Money would only last so long, or you would have like a Francis Maui Noah, for example, in his first 2 years with the potential that he has to be a first rounder. Say, if these coaches aren't it, I'm out after 2 years, and I can easily get an equal bag at Oregon. I can easily get an equal bag at these other two schools, right? But it's okay. It's okay to say money played a factor because again, like I said, two things can be true at the same time, and I do think money did play a factor. I just don't think it played the factor. What I think it did was it eliminated the allure of an Oregon, of an Ohio State, of a Georgia. It took that prestige that so many kids were blinded by for so many years and the under the table compensation, removing that. Now everyone's playing at a similar level, you know? Uh,
It's a lot more fun to have a bidding war out in public than it is to see your entire roster in Tuscaloosa driving the same Dodge Charger everywhere. Yeah,
exactly.
totally
And
agree.
it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. Maybe we'll get some more guardrails on it, hopefully. But this is not going to change. And one of the people who will move over to next who's got a problem with this is Indiana coach Curt Cignetti, the man firing strays at us during an interview with CBS Sports and talking to boosters last week, talking about, he said, this is an unprecedented couple days, weeks where everybody's waiting on this rev share, which they're talking about the House settlement. There's 5 or 6 programs out there that have unlimited NIL resources. It's kind of scary for everyone else. Our little pot of gold at Indiana is pretty nice, but we're not at 40 million or 30 million or even 25 million. He indicted 6 schools saying they were spending 40 million on the roster, being Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Miami, us, Notre Dame, and Texas Tech as sports biggest spenders. What do you think it was Kurt's issue? Do you think it was the NIL and team spending 40 million, or do you think this was more him challenging his boosters to raise money?
It's the latter. It's definitely something where look, there's a little truth to everything.
Right.
He's trying to explain and motivate a fan base that's historically been basketball to say, look, we need your money in college football. It's the biggest revenue driver. I know you guys love your striped pants. You love the Bobby Knight throwing the chair onto the court. Those times are over, bud. If you want to have this athletic department moving, you need to put some money into football. So he's trying to use that as an example of saying, here's what they're doing. Now, by calling out the other schools, look, this is a guy that historically is known to be a little bit of a crybaby. This was the guy that last year was also complaining about other schools in the Big Ten saying they don't respect us. And then the playoffs came around and it looks like they they were proven right in the sense of that was a little bit of a softer schedule in the conference versus some
Yep.
of the others out there like your Ohio States and your Oregons that were playing. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. Usually those are behind closed doors kind of conversations where you're trying to motivate your boosters. So it's fine. You could say that kind of stuff. I mean, yeah, those are the big programs are going to have the biggest NIL pots. And they want to talk about little pots of gold in Indiana. Yeah, one of the teams that he named is actually just a little bit further up north over there in South Bend. And those guys got a big pot of gold to go play for all the time. It's just always being replenished by NBC Sports. And that's my only Lou Holtz reference of the episode.
I think I agree with you. I think this was him challenging his boosters, but the thing with the problem I have with any school coming from the Big Ten is it's not like you guys aren't being fairly compensated. So when you sit there and you talk about, oh well, our little old bag over here at Indiana, I'm like, you're getting paid the same amount as Ohio State. You're getting paid the same amount as Michigan. It's not like you guys are doing some sort of adjusted revenue like we are in the ACC. Everyone's getting the same slice, and whether or not you're putting that towards your football program or you're evenly distributing that amongst all your athletic departments, it's a little suspect. And my issue is, okay, well, you just signed an extension at Indiana. You knew what you were getting into when you went to Indiana, right? You knew you weren't going to Texas, for example, or even now. I didn't even know Texas Tech had all this money, by the way, which we'll get into in the next story. But I just think, again, like I was alluding to in the Miami story with Jackson Cantwell, NIL's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And on top of that, it's not like it started this year or even last year. This is something that's been around for a couple of years. It's been in speculation for even longer than that. It's not like, oh, well, what are we going to do when people start get paying their players? Well, you should kind of have a plan in place, I feel like. You should see these things a couple feet out. Like you shouldn't wait till it hits you in the face and go, "Oh, how did we get here?" and get caught with your pants down. You know what I mean? So I feel like Curt Cignetti. I love the idea that some teams are spending 40 million. I know we're not. There's a lot of trusted people that I follow, um, both on Twitter and on YouTube that can corroborate that. You do the math, just in general, you don't get to 40 million as Miami, but I can't speak for the other schools. But again, I think NIL is here to stay. Now, whether the guardrails are put on it by the House or by this next executive order that we're going to talk about, that will maybe change, but players are going to get paid and everyone's going to get paid, and you got to raise the money. You got to politic. That's what you are. You're a CEO. As a head coach, you're a CEO and a politician.
Also, and let's not act like Curt Cignetti and the Big Ten and all of those other member schools aren't trying to lock their talent down, their kids down for multiple years and signing away their NIL rights, as we learned from the Xavier Lucas situation. So again, let's just, if you want to call a spade, yeah, some programs have the money out there. Some of you guys are also trying to use some really, really shoddy contract work and try to lock kids into places to keep them under control. So
Yeah, and it's just again, it's we're gonna see, and we alluded to this during the season that this is a very wild college football. The last year, maybe the year before, and then this year, it's going and probably I would say yeah, this year will probably be the last year because I think we're gonna have the settlement with the House versus NCAA. It will be interesting to see where the changes go because we know they're coming. For example, President Donald Trump is making plans to create a presidential commission on college athletics. The commission will be led by former Alabama coach Nick Saban and Texas billionaire businessman Cody Campbell. That's the Texas Tech guy I was telling you. Him and his friend, I guess, created this oil technology, sold it for like $4 billion, and now he's just taking the majority of his share of that, putting into Texas Tech. And so I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but apparently Saban is concerned and has been very vocal of the current NIL landscape, expressing concerns about the potential negative impact on college sports, including a lack of competitive balance, which I think is hysterical coming from Nick Saban, but that's neither here nor there. Apparently, what they want to do with this commission is kind of figure out, are these NIL deals real, legit, or is this literally, pay for play? They want to establish some guidelines or regulations for these NIL payments, address concerns about competitive balance in college athletics. Um, and so, my thing, Rudy, is what do you think happens first? Do you think the House versus the NCAA settlement, which was supposed to happen last month, which now has been bumped to May, has more of a impact on college sports, or do you think this commission that President Trump, Nick Saban, and what is his name, Cody Campbell, are putting together will have a bigger impact?
the house settlement's gonna be bigger. I honestly, I think the latter is just a publicity stunt. It's just something that like they're not going to be able to have as much time into research and do all this stuff. Like Nick Saban maybe will give you a little bit of input from his end. He's going to go back to college game day responsibilities in a couple of months. Billionaires have a lot of great ideas. They also don't really have much of execution on their end. So unless he's hiring an entire staff to take his ideas and put it down on paper, I'm talking about Cody Campbell, to then come through, it's usually just a lot of barking and not a whole lot of want to talk about changing competitive landscape. This is like the fox is running the hen house in the sense of
Right.
Nick Saban was pre NIL and was getting away with a lot of stuff in Tuscaloosa. And then you're having what's probably the number one like propagator kind of situation where there's a guy with a lot of money who's dumping his investment into a college program. And that's what Les Wexner does at Ohio State. That's what Phil Knight does at Oregon. Oregon being another program that's been highly successful at divulging funds pre NIL.
Yeah.
So like that's the kind of stuff where I don't think that's going to really go anywhere. Or they might get some feedback in terms of how the NIL process works amongst a few different schools, but it really has to come from a governing body. So I say the House. The House will
Yeah, I
probably
think
have a.
I think there's actually it's gonna be a multi-headed approach. I think the House versus NCAA will lay a foundation, a groundwork, maybe a blueprint for all intents and better words. But I actually do think I think the fact that Nick Saban was able to get into Trump's ear. Trump loves signing executive orders, but you also have, I think there's a commission, not a commission necessarily, but there's already a group of senators who have been exploring taking some sort of legislative action to codify rules for the NCAA. There's six, there's three or two Republicans and three Democrats in this like little like committee that have been kind of trying to work over this. And I think they're kind of going to partner with this executive commission of Nick Saban and Cody Campbell. And I think what will happen is we'll see kind of just ideas all around. We'll see like I said, the blueprint set out with the House versus NCAA, and then we'll see things get codified through maybe this executive order and then this congressional committee that's been kind of talking about this for a while. And that's why I said I think after this year, I think this will probably be the last year where everyone can do whatever they want. There won't be any rules, there won't be any caps. But I think going into 2028, you'll start seeing there'll be probably be caps. There'll probably be limitations in terms of transfers, which we can get into next because that's the next other biggest thing in college football going on. And we're going to see things kind of get back to a more stable uh, behavior in college football as opposed to it being just run and gun as it is.
Yep. I agree with you.
Yeah. And so we've got NIL as the one part of the two-headed beast. The other one being the transfer portal. This was a wild spring portal. A lot of people said a lot of crazy things were going to happen. I thought a couple more crazy things were going to happen, but it was definitely as wild as I thought it was going to be. But right now, the ACC media days are occurring, and one of the things that was brought up was a proposal to remake the spring calendar. Was shared with coaches at the ACC spring meetings, including an addition of 6 contactless OTA style practices, likely in May and June, so like a little summer practice they would get, which would add the 6 to the 15 already, giving teams 21 days to basically practice in the off season before, fall camp starts. Um, that's not the important part though. The important part in this proposal that was brought up is the fact that they will eliminate the spring portal. What they'll do is they're saying is combining the winter and the spring portal and just having one. So they would move it to like a January, maybe March, April timeframe. So you would get it earlier than the normal spring, and then maybe some teams could get their spring practices in before that, but you would eliminate the 2 windows so that teams wouldn't get in because you had the whole Nico Imaliava debacle. You had teams canceling spring practice. Where do you think, Rudy, the transfer portal goes from here?
It's such a weird situation, right? Because at this point, even though there's still designated windows, it kind of feels like it's always open no matter what. Because even though you're
Right.
not immediately going into the portal, you're having the whole option of like opting out very, very, very early on, and people are just waiting until whatever that date is. Okay, cool. I'm entering myself in the portal and checking out at this point. So, in terms of what it looks like, yeah, I don't think there's a problem with eliminating an entire transfer window because at some point there is something to be said about just look at the numbers of players who have entered the portal, who have transferred out of schools. It's a lot.
It's like
Do
about
all of
3,000.
them
I did some research. It's about 3,000 every portal window. There's about 3,000 players that go in. Now, not
Yeah.
all of them transfer. Some of them pull their
No.
name back out of the portal and they stay at their school. But on average, it's usually anywhere between, at the lowest, it's like 2,400, and then at its height, it's about 3,000.
Not all 3,000 of those players are going to be getting any more playing time elsewhere. A lot of
Yeah.
it is I look at it like I think by closing the window and leaving it to just one time, it actually leads to better decisions for some of these young men and women who are transferring out in different sports because stuff happens. There might be a moment where you think, okay, I need to hit this transfer portal. I need to get out of here. And if it's open too often, it leads to that jumping around where
Oh,
you have
yeah.
athletes that are moving 5, 6 schools in 2 years, in 3 years.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe just toughing it out a little bit, not to sound like a boomer and say, oh, well, see where it goes, but like you have the ability to make the decision. It should be kind of like a one time period over the course of several months versus having a window in one time of the year, then a window again at another time of the year, then a window again another time of the year. So I don't think that's a problem because in terms of like development and playing time, you do your season. If you opt out, you don't lose your eligibility anyway. So in that case, one window is all you need.
Yeah, and then you get into these situations where we had not last year but the year before where TBD goes down. You have this happen all the time, and sometimes it's actually in the spring. So you'll declare for the spring portal, and then you'll have the spring game or spring practice, and someone gets injured, and that would have been your opportunity to step up and next man up, and you lost that, and now you're competing for another spot that you still might end up in the same position but on another team. And so I think, yeah, I think they need to get rid of one of the portals. I think just in general, I think the winter portal is really dumb. For the sense that where it falls, where you have the portal window, then you have early national signing day, and then you've got coaches that have to get ready for the playoff. And it's like if they make the playoff, and they're all like this year, I think they were all within like I think I want to say like a 9-day window. And it's just I think it's just too much for programs, for players to make a decision. Things fluctuate, and you get into the Nico situation, right? The whole Nico Maliava thing, like apparently that wasn't even a spring issue. That was a carryover of the winter portal, where he actually was threatening to, apparently rumor has it, and several players were kind of asking for more money since they made the playoffs, and we're like, hey, like if I don't get my money, like I may just sit this out, and I guess maybe cooler heads prevailed, wise decisions were made, and these players ended up playing no matter what. But you have that. When you have that, like you said, when you have that option to jump out at any point, it's naturally going to be maybe a little too tempting for some players. And then you had players like this Memphis O lineman, I forgot his name, who declared before there were any spring games. Like he was just like, "Yep, I'm entering the portal. I'm not going to play." And it's like, but you may be the starter. He's like, "Yep, don't want to be here. I'm good." Like you said, and it just, I wonder, do you think if they cancel the either the winter or the spring portal, one of the two, do you think that will impact spring games? Do you think that we could possibly see more people do away with the spring game and just have spring practices and then kind of have like a little like fan thing where they do fun activities as opposed to an actual game?
I think it depends on where they put the window, right? Like it's one of those where it should be after the season's over with, so you don't have to worry about any of these, playoff implications, and it should be before spring ball, so that way you don't have any issues with that. Like if they want to use the spring game as a way of like debuting your new talent that either came in through the transfer portal or an early signing period for like a high school team, or a high school player where they come out early enroll, start in like January, that'd be really cool to do. But if it still sits the way that it is now, yeah, why would you have a spring game at this point? At this point, to be honest with you, most of the spring games really don't mean much of anything anymore already as it is, because the whole format of them have changed so much, and the threat of injuries happening in the offseason, playing on these kinds of games are also a bigger risk on their ends too. So at this point, like they're playing so much football. And as you mentioned, the ACC meetings about adding those extra OTAs, if you get an
Right.
extra X number of days of practice, don't do a spring game, because that's even more stuff to worry about having to prepare for. They need rest more than anything else too. Like these are kids that are putting their bodies through a gauntlet every single week for the entire fall. Some of them, depending on where they're based, are playing in really, really high temperatures at the beginning of the year, and they're playing in below zero temperatures at the end of it.
That's true.
So there's a bunch of stuff that they're having to deal with their own bodies. And if these guys end up having to go pro at some point and end up playing in the NFL, you're just adding more years of damage and abuse on that. So give them the time to rest, because that means a lot more. Get them in the weight room, let them build themselves up, let them heal from their injuries, and get back at it. There's so much
Yeah.
football to be played. There's no need for it.
What do you think is the what when would be the better time for the portal? Do you think late January after the national championship game or late April?
Late January.
Late
Absolutely late
January.
January. Yeah, get it out of the way immediately after the playoffs, because what most programs do is they have some sort of a debrief with all their talent anyway. So they go through, they have meetings with their position coaches, they meeting with their head coaches and say, look, love what you did this year. I think you need to improve on X, Y, and Z. Go get yourself better. Go be back for spring ball or back by summer practice with X amount of muscle on you and all this kind of stuff. And we're ready to go. Hey, you have some things you need to improve on. We need to work on X, Y, and Z. I don't really see you X high enough on the depth chart. Some of those conversations are even harder of, I don't think I have a spot for you here by next
Yeah.
year. So there's all sorts of stuff like that that happens. All those conversations happen immediately after the season's over with. So you should know by January 30th or February 1st, whatever that is, and say that's when you're hitting the window. Get all that mania out of the way. Give them like a 2 week window from February to whatever it is. Hey, you want to steal some momentum from the NFL? Do that during the NFL playoffs before they go to Super Bowl weekend, and make
Right.
that your window and let that be. So Miami picks up Carson Beck in that transfer window that happens in that portion. Cool. He's debuting at the spring game. He's hurt. He's nursing his injury. He's going to come by. He's going to say a couple of words. He's going to go on Snapchat and do all sorts of other stuff looking for a
Break up
new
with his
girl,
girlfriend.
break up with his girlfriend and all that kind of stuff. And, we'll get that all out of the way in the first 2 weeks and then we'll move on. So, yeah, I think that's the best place for it.
Yeah, I love the argument and I definitely see the value in it. I took a different perspective on that. And I was thinking, I think there should be just an April. And here's where I went with it. I think the April one is valuable for all the reasons you gave. I definitely think you're right. It would allow teams to get it. But here's the other thing. If God forbid there is an injury in the spring game or spring practices, you now have players who can now say, oh, I don't need to leave. I can stay here, be the next man up. I think it also gives teams, for an example, like a Emory Williams, right? We saw Emory in the bowl game. We saw him at spring. Listen, bud, we've had two great sample sizes, one live, one controlled with our practices and our game. You're not the guy. Go find somewhere else to play for that exact example. Because I think, let's just be real. When kids are entering the portal, there's already some sort of tampering going on. Whether you want to call it egregious or not, someone from a party from the school is contacting a party from the player, whether it's a second cousin, a friend of a friend. There's some sort of communication going on. It's not like these kids enter the portal and they're like, okay, guys, I'm a free agent. Let me know where I'm going. There's kind of an idea, and the breadcrumbs you follow the breadcrumbs, right? So by that point, you end the regular football season. You say, okay, well, I'm just going to use Emory Williams because he's, to me, the best example of this. Okay, well, we had our guy Emery in the game, didn't do exactly what we wanted to do. We gave him some time off. We gave him a whole spring to develop. Let's see where he's at. Still wasn't our guy. We got to go out, get another quarterback, right? And you'll know, especially after watching other teams practice and watching their postseason game, hey, like, this is who they got. I kind of want him. And you get that, you don't take away from NFL. You don't compete with the NFL, which is what I was looking at. I was looking at how do we not compete with the NFL? You also get this boost in the spring that people can look forward to because now by that point, and I think you can also even bring up signing day uh for high school kids, even because I think the original signing day was in May, right? That's like, and then they moved it to December for the early. So it's like if you have it in May, you just bring it up to the week before, and then bam, everyone can start deciding really quick. We're done, and we move on. You can segue to the NFL draft, and everyone has their summers off except for those 6 days, and we move on. That's what I was thinking for the April day. But speaking of the ACC or partial members of the ACC, looks like Clemson and Notre Dame have agreed to a 12-year deal to play every year starting in 2027. Rudy, is this going to be a new ACC rivalry? Is this a rivalry?
Let's put it this way. Who do you think benefits the most out of this deal? Does Notre Dame benefit or does Clemson benefit?
I got to be honest. I think it's a mutually beneficial agreement. I think this is like, I'm going to help you and you're going to help me. I think when you look at, especially when you look at the new revenue share, right? So it's partial success on the field, but ratings. Well, if you have Notre Dame on your schedule, and you damn well know that either ESPN or NBC is going to be making this a primetime game every year, that's it. That's an automatic W for both teams. Both teams are going to definitely get ratings boosts in this. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, I think it's actually mutually beneficial. I think this was kind of a no-brainer for both teams, especially when the ACC, which is I don't know how a conference just constantly shoots itself in the foot. But when you tell Notre Dame and Clemson, you guys have to play on a rotation, Florida State, Miami, Notre Dame, Clemson, you all have to play each other every year. What did you think was going to happen? Who do you think won in this?
I think it's a short-term win for Clemson. I think it's a
Hmm.
long-term benefit for Notre Dame. And I say that because I look at these two programs and they're kind of on different trajectories, right? I think in the short term, it helps Clemson out with its goal, like you said, of getting that high visibility uh, revenue share from the ACC by just scheduling an opponent that everyone's going to want to watch anyway.
Right.
I even though Clemson somehow found a way to pull a rabbit out of their hat last year and win the ACC after having what was their
Right.
worst year in a while, they're still kind of on that downward slide to me. So I look at it as this is something that may look like a compelling matchup for a couple of years, but if Clemson doesn't right the ship anytime soon, they could end up becoming another Navy for Notre Dame on their schedule. It's one of those where like the Notre Dame Florida State rivalry looked really cool for a couple of years, especially like, when Jameis was playing and when they had a couple of good years. But after that, Florida State's been kind of a joke. So I think for Clemson, this is their way of trying to stay afloat for a couple of years and figure themselves out. Whereas Notre Dame's like, cool, it's another team that's on our schedule. Our strength of schedule always kind of looks like it's kind of soft. We don't really care. We're just gonna go out and do what we need to do because we're independent. We can schedule who we want with our, mandated 5 or 7 ACC games a year out of it. At least this way, they're letting themselves know that they're getting the higher end of the ACC because now that they're going to have Miami, you said Miami, Florida State, Clemson, basically the three they're rotating through.
Rotating.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's one less. That's one less matchup with Duke or Wake Forest or Boston. I mean, they always play Boston College anyway because of the two, like the Jesuit school
Yep.
kind of connection on their end. So at least that's a way of cementing themselves. At least they're playing the upper end. So it helps them in both ways. If Clemson ends up, sucking in a couple of years, it's not Notre Dame's fault because how many of these long-term negotiations with adding like programs to your schedule, how do them really pan out? Like I remember when Miami announced that they're playing Michigan State back in like 2002. They made this announcement they're going to play in 2021 and like 2026 or something like that. I thought, oh, it'd be really cool. I wonder what it's going to look like back then. Well, the Miami that signed that deal is not the Miami that showed up.
Yep. So to me, I also thought I think actually, just what ride with me here. I think this is actually also mutually beneficial. The reason why I say mutually beneficial for Clemson in the long run, also because you mentioned short term for Clemson. If Clemson wants to leave and go to the Big Ten or go to the SEC, whichever where they go, if they have a locked in agreement with Notre Dame to say, hey, we've got this. So when you go to re up your media contract with Fox or whatever, we've got this team coming in every year to our stadium playing us. So you've got a guarantee. You know what I mean? I think it's one of those things where I think both schools see that, which we were talking about this year, the power of branding, and that the media, and by media I mean the TV corporations who are paying for the media rights, see the value in big brands playing each other. And you're going to start seeing, especially now that we're going to start probably seeing teams, especially in the SEC, who are 7-3 or will be more like 7-6, I guess, but like 8-4, right? For example, making the playoff and possibly even getting a bye based on the type of year it is. That having a perfect schedule, going undefeated, that's going to be a relic of the past. No one's going to do that. Maybe once a generation, you'll see a team do that, but that teams are going to lose. But the way you get into the playoffs and the way you really make your money is by scheduling good teams and having good teams. And I think the writing was on the wall for both schools, and they were like, yeah, that's where I think really think this is going. A lot of people are spinning this as a rivalry. Rudy? How do you define a rivalry? Like to you, what's a rivalry?
You can start a rivalry this way, but is it a rivalry right now? Absolutely not. Tell me the last time Clemson and Notre Dame played each other.
I think it was
Right
like
off the
three
top of your
years
head.
ago. I think it was like three
Yeah,
years ago, 3-4 years
right.
ago. Yeah,
One game.
and I think
One game.
I think Notre Dame actually won that, but then they played it 2 years prior to that in the playoffs, and Clemson beat them.
Yeah, I don't consider that a rivalry. Like, I think there has to be such a significant like amount of weight on the line for something to be a
Social
rivalry if
equity,
they don't play every single year. Yeah, like let's be homers and let's look at Miami.
right?
Who are our rivals? We have Florida State as a rival because we play them every single year and they hate each other's guts and
Right.
all the kids come from the same market and so, even before they were in the same conference when Miami was Big East and Florida State was ACC alone,
Right.
like that's
Even when we were
always that's
independent too.
Right. That's your version of like Ohio State, Michigan. That's every cross state rivalry. That's your traditional one.
Right.
Florida Gators, UF, has always been a rival of Miami, even though for a very long time they did not play each other very often. I think in our youth, they stopped playing each other in 1987 and they
Hmm.
hadn't played again until 2000.
Yep.
And then after 2000, they played again in 2000. They already had a home and home schedule 2002, 2003. So just happened to have a bowl game that where they met up again in 2004. So like that was the span of like, 18 years, something like that, where they didn't play with each other. That's still a rivalry because the hatred is still there in terms of taking teams off the schedule. That's like your right now your modern Texas and Texas A&M. When Texas A&M went to the SEC, that annual game died. But now that they're
Right.
both in the SEC again, that rivalry is reborn. The hatred never left. They just happen
Okay.
to be playing together. Clemson and Notre Dame, there's no hatred there.
Yeah.
Zero. The only thing you could say as a Clemson fan, I'm not going to do the Lou Holtz voice again, but you could say that you hate Lou Holtz twice because if you're old enough to remember when Lou Holtz coached at South Carolina, you could say, oh, they've had that guy at two different places. I don't like any of the stops he went to.
Yeah. You're really
That's what you
fishing.
do.
You're really stretching and reaching
Right.
for it.
So like right. So there's nothing really else that's there. There's not like a benches clearing moment that's happened. Yeah, they met up in big games, but that's the way I look at it. When you meet in the playoffs now, you're not really a rival anymore. I would say that Oregon and Ohio State are developing a rivalry because they had the potential to meet each other 3 times in the same season, which
Right.
would have been absolutely nuts. They met twice. So pretty big deal. But and also they got O's as their logo. So like there's a bunch of stuff that you can like spin off, but it has to continue. One game does not make a rivalry, two games will make a rivalry, decades make a rivalry.
Yeah, so for me, I define a rivalry as it's gotta have either all 3 or at least 2 of the 3 components, which first has to be history. So there's gotta be some sort of historical, conflict between the 2 schools, whether it's, like a regionality or proximity, or whether it's just the 2 have been playing for so long. For example, Notre Dame and Stanford or Notre Dame and USC, like, there's no regionality there, but the 2 have just been playing so frequently that and for so long that they have a history, right? The next is what's the word I'm looking for? The consistency, right? So how often do you play? Right? Like are you playing every year? Because like you were about to say Florida. Yeah, I would consider Florida a rival, but if we're really talking, I would consider more Virginia Tech more of a rival than Florida because we play them a lot more. There's a lot more, and then this is the third component: stakes. Right. So what are at stake? So this is where Florida kind of does come back in because you have a recruiting stake, you have bragging rights stakes. So there's got to be a history, there's got to be a consistency of playing every year, and then there's got to be stakes. So what's is and that's what made the FSU Miami rivalry so great because for the better part of almost 2 decades, whoever won that almost always went to the national championship or was competing for a national championship. You know what I mean? So it's like if you don't have 2 or all 3 of those things, it's not really a rivalry. And that's again, I'm in agreement with you. I don't think this is a rivalry and they're trying to spin this as a rivalry or a new rivalry in the making. I don't think we can manufacture rivalries. Rivalries kind of have to just be born or come out, kind of like the what you were alluding to, the Ohio State and the Oregon. That's a great rivalry because why? There's 2 things that are in there. One, they're going to play consistently because they're in the same conference, but 2, the stakes. Those 2 teams are going to be at the top of the Big Ten for the foreseeable future, right?
Yep.
And so whoever wins that game is most likely going to either be playing for the Big Ten championship or the national championship or both, right? So that's going to be a great rivalry. But to just put 2 people in teams and like what I was alluding to, saying that the media and the TV companies are going to try and just manufacture these rivalries, I don't think it's going to be. Which leads to my next question: do you think this is the beginning of the death of actual rivalries? Because now that Clemson is choosing Notre Dame, and yes, they're technically an ACC school, but if they leave, they won't be. Do you do you think that puts a threat, even though they have said they're going to keep their rivalry game with South Carolina, but as the media conglomerates start to manufacture these kind of games, do you think this puts in jeopardy traditional rivalries that we're used to?
It puts non-conference rivalries at risk. I
Mm,
think so. Something that you've seen across realignment even in the early days of realignment from 20 something years ago when Miami joined the ACC, is that usually rivals negotiate together. So as much as they're rivals on the field, they're very much business partners off of it because they know that each other's success and each other's mutual hatred of each other is what drives the dollars. So like
Exactly.
when the Pac-12 imploded, you saw USC and UCLA stay in lockstep and say, we're going to go somewhere together. When Miami joined the ACC in 2004, Florida State was a big part of making that happen in terms of bringing Miami in. As you mentioned with Virginia Tech, then Miami brought along Virginia Tech originally with them. And then a couple of other Big East teams came afterwards, but really like that's where the rivals always negotiate together. When Texas and Oklahoma left the Big 12 to go to the SEC, they did it together. So that's the
Right.
kind of piece where like I think you're going to see intra conference, that the teams that are in the same conference, those aren't going to die. I think a good example, though, of what you mentioned of where rivalries kind of like fall through in the same conference is when you have, what's the word I'm looking for? How does the ACC, as you said, keep shooting itself in the foot? The rotation of opponents that you have. Have you noticed that Miami and Virginia Tech were not annual opponents anymore as of a couple of years ago?
Yep.
Yeah, that killed that rivalry. Because if you
Yeah,
go
it did.
back when they were together in the Big East, those were the two that were competing for the conference title every single year.
Yep.
Blacksburg, Virginia had a lot more going for itself. Since the first couple of years of success in the ACC, they haven't been there anymore. So the only
Yeah.
thing that they had really tying them was playing Miami. And then Miami wasn't that good. They continued to suffer. And now Virginia Tech is still in that same boat where they're just kind of like this middling team. They don't even have to play Miami every year. Their best watched game was what happened last year with the was that a catch? Was it not a catch? Kind of Hail Mary thing that happened. That again, how does the ACC keep shooting itself in the foot? They can't even officiate that game properly. But
Correct.
either way, like that's the biggest moment that they've had in 5 years. So I think that's where you're going to see that rivals have to continue negotiating together as part of a conference. But now these cross conference rivalries. So, for example, like USC and Notre Dame, you mentioned that that's always been a great rivalry, mostly because of the old style of college ball where these teams in the Midwest would find a way to play in a really sunny location towards
Yep.
the end of the year. That was always a great thing for tourism, for families, for different places across the country to really create that kind of like it's at a cross town, it's a cross country group of like it's a different style of football playing against each other.
Yeah.
That stuff's in danger now. That's the stuff that's in danger. And those are the ones that yeah, I just I don't know how many with the way the scheduling works, the way the media works now. I don't know if there's going to be many places for these cross conferences to work. Like does this Notre Dame Clemson thing then put their annual game with South Carolina at risk?
Right.
It might. It might, and that's a good one still because South Carolina is a pretty decent team every single year, and Clemson needs as much quality competition as it can get.
Yeah, I mean, other than the last, let's just say 10, 12 years max, maybe like 10, Clemson and South Carolina are pretty middle tier teams. They both were middle tier teams in,
Yeah,
in their respective conferences. It's not like until Dabo really brought Clemson up,
yeah,
it's not like Clemson was a powerhouse. You know what I mean? So
nope.
you would hate to see that rivalry go away. Sticking with the ACC though, do you think this deal is a good thing or a bad thing for the ACC? Because some people are suggesting that this was done under Jim Phillips' nose and that he probably did not have anything to do with this. And so, was this an undermining of the ACC? Does this help booster the ACC when they go for renegotiations in a few years? They're going to say, hey, we've got this deal with Notre Dame.
I look at it as if it happened under the commissioner's nose, there's nobody to blame but the commissioner. Because I think the issue with some of these conferences is that the ones that have issues and the ones that usually implode are the ones that don't have good leadership. It's what happened with the Pac 12. They had an issue with competition with officiating, and they had an issue with media rights. And if you look at the ACC, they have an issue with officiating and they have an issue with media rights. And not all of it was 100% Jim Phillips doing. Some of that was also the previous commissioner of the ACC because some of the Raycom media partnerships that happened, there was a lot of nepotism in that negotiation. So John Swafford, I believe, was the name of the previous ACC
Right.
commissioner. I think there was
Yep.
a guy even before him. So that's that's just decades of what's the word I'm looking for of leadership that's kind of asleep at the wheel,
Hmm.
and yeah, at this point, like I think any negative news that comes out about the ACC, I would not be surprised if they're trying to essentially work behind the scenes to try to force some sort of regime change. Because for the conference to stay healthy, you have to have leadership that's going to, put the conference first and really operate in its best interest, because that's what you've seen so far with the Big Ten and the SEC. Like, their conference commissioners are at the top of their game. They are the
Yeah.
best in the business, and they're the reason why everybody stays in line. We were joking a couple of episodes ago. I know it felt like an eternity now because I've been away for so long, but we talked about how if there's any changes in leadership at certain levels of either university presidents, or if there's any loss of confidence between the member institutions, the commissioners are done for, because they have to keep everybody in lockstep with what they're doing, because that's where the value is for the conference. That's what keeps all of the member institutions in line. If they start going off and doing their own thing, chaos ensues, and then you have yourself a free for all. So at this point, yeah, the ACC could be going that way, and I wouldn't be surprised if maybe other member institutions start doing that with Notre Dame. We're already going to be playing each other every couple of years. Let's just lock this down and make this actually work, because it's mutually beneficial. To hell with the conference at this point.
Yeah, I think just quickly wrap this up. I think both teams, for this to benefit the ACC, both teams need to do well. The Clemson needs to remain relevant. They need to be playing in the ACC championship or be just out of it. And same thing with Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame needs to stay relevant. And the only way that the ACC can benefit from this is if they can say, hey, we've got Notre Dame on 3 of our team schedules every year. We've got these other schools. I think they're going to have to use this as kind of like a blueprint to maybe bring in another storied program. I'm not sure if it's like an Ohio State or Michigan or a Texas or an Oklahoma, but it's got to be of that tier in nature to play an ACC team every year. Because if not, yeah, I think the writing's on the wall for the ACC. I think this is, like you said, this is an undermining, and then this is just going to be one out of many schools that are going to be looking out for their own interests as they're on their way out. But before we wrap this show up, Rudy, we got to talk about it. It's something that, maybe a little controversial, but On3 has already released its first post-spring top 25 rankings. Wow. If as if it wasn't too early, but we got to do it. Ari Wasserman releasing his top 25 post spring top 25. So let's look at this. Miami is at number 20. We'll get to that in a minute, but I want to talk about teams 1 through 5 really quick. We've got, for those of you who may not be able to see this and maybe just listening, we've got Penn State at 1, Texas at 2, Clemson at 3, Ohio State at 4, and LSU at 5. Wild to me that LSU has already gone up to number 5 when they're barely competing for the SEC, but that's neither here nor there. Clemson coming off probably one of its worst years, but somehow still winning the ACC and making the college football playoff. Number 3. What sticks out to you when you look at this top 25?
It's that top five also. It's the top five. It's Illinois at 10,
Yeah.
which uh, Illinois at 10, Brett Bielema at 10, Florida at 11 after they were going to fire Billy Napier, week 3 in. Like, oh, they had a late surge last year. DJ Lagway is going to be the next Heisman guy. All right. Yeah, I don't know. Cam Scadaboo got drafted. He was all of Arizona State. So they're at 13. Like,
Well, in fairness, I think Arizona State had 2 stud wide receivers that they lost late in the season, which is why Cam Scadaboo became such a defining figure on the offense for Arizona State, specifically in the college football playoff. But going into I explicitly remember covering this for the Big 12 championship game, them losing their 2 star wide receivers to injury, forcing them to lean on Cam Scadaboo. So I think they're returning both of those wide receivers, which is why Ari may have put them so high at 13. But go on.
I just, the whole list is kind of boggling to me. Like Notre Dame at 7. Do you know who they got at quarterback to relieve
Lloyd
what's his
Carr's
name?
grandson, I believe it is, right? Lloyd Carr. Is AJ Carr or something like that. I forgot what his name is. I know it's Lloyd Carr's grandson. That's all I know.
Either way, there's so many question marks here that
Which is
uh
interesting. He's playing at Notre Dame and not Michigan. If he was good
yeah.
enough, don't you think he would be playing at Michigan?
I mean, I know that was a rough go. I don't know if they still have sour grapes in that family after the way he was kind of run out of town at the end. I mean, remember his last year was that season opening
Yeah.
loss to Appalachian State. Some people are able to, like, let bygones be bygones. And in some cases, once that cord is cut, there is no rethreading it. So I mean, who knows? Or maybe he wasn't even recruited by Michigan. Michigan, who knows?
That's true.
I just the whole list boggles my mind. Honestly, it's I almost want to say it kind of goes off on the realm of I want to know what uh what drugs is Ari Wasserman on, because this is a little weird.
I
It's a little
watched
weird.
him I watched him tease this top 25, and he was saying basically that he looked at depth, the roster depth. So like how many elite players did they have, and then how many good players were playing behind those elite players, in other words. And again, I love I love the criteria. I think that's great criteria to have. I think that's really good. I think you just can't go on who beat who last season because they're different teams, right? But I also think you kind of got to look at like, okay, who comes in the transfer? How does Miami? This is again, and I know I'm going to sound like a homer when I say this, but how does Miami fall to number 20, right? When you have, and again, this I know this is pre Cantwell, but let's just say we keep Cantwell out. Miami, well, I think had the number 4 portal class, right? So like they the fourth best portal class. They're bringing back a relatively young nucleus of a team. They've completely overhauled their defense, but yet you still think Arizona State, BYU, who we just stole their leading wide receiver and punt returner and kickoff returner, an Illinois team who literally struggled against a Michigan team. I mean, they beat Michigan, but like the first half of that game they were struggling, and then last season, like that was the only team you could realistically say that they beat, that they were good, that was good, and then Michigan wasn't even that good, right?
No.
And then you look at
Illinois'
teams.
only yeah, Illinois' only headline was Brett Bielema being a dick to Shane Beamer and doing the little, like, signal, the cross signal on the side during the bowl game. Like,
Yeah, I just
that's
there's
that
like there
was their season highlight.
the four teams to me that just like I'm just like okay. I'm not mad. I'm not in the top 10, but I just don't know how you put Illinois, BYU, Arizona State, South Carolina, who just lost their quarterback to Colorado, Auburn, and Texas Tech ahead of us. And OU, who was and Oklahoma. There's 7 teams in front of us that I'm just like I'm not seeing how they are head over shoulders better than us, where you could literally stack them. I think people's issue is, and I get it. I'm not saying yes, we lost all of our wide receivers and playmakers on offense, or key playmakers. We lost Arroyo, Cam, Xavier, but it's not like the guys who are coming up are steep drop offs. You know what I mean? Like Carson Beck, and even with an injury, again, it's not like we're starting Emory Williams. If we were starting Emory Williams, I would be like, yeah, I kind of get why they did that. It's like, is Carson Beck going to be Cam? Absolutely not. But is he going to be that much lower than Cam? No. Like Malachi Tony, like for all intents and purposes, we didn't have time to go over this, and it's a little late, but like according to like all intel on our spring game, Malachi Tony is him. I mean, yes, he's a slot, and he's that we got a lot of slot guys, which is my main issue. Got a lot of slots. Um, he is him apparently, and then you have JoJo Trader, who apparently was number 2 to Jeremiah. What's his name? Jeremiah Smith.
Yep.
It's not like the guys that we lost are being replaced by a bunch of jokers. You know what I mean?
You got
So it's
Mark
like,
Fletcher and Jordan Lyle in your backfield and an incredible
yeah, and then
offensive line. Yeah.
And then everyone was
Now,
making a big deal out of that running back out of North Dakota State, which I have no idea who, I don't know how good he's going to do coming from the FCS. But either way, my point is like people are making big deals about our transfer portal class, but then at the same time, on the other hand, saying, yeah, but I don't know how well you guys are going to do.
I just found it funny that, like, they have Clemson number 3, and then Miami is the next highest ranked ACC team. And it's like, well, you know what? We don't have enough ACC teams in this top 25. Let's just throw them all next to each other, 20, 21, and 22, with SMU and
Yeah.
Louisville. It's just like, yeah, we got to show them some love. Just throw them in there in the bottom half of whatever this is. I just, yeah, I think if you look at just let's keep on the Miami piece for now, because I wasn't expecting Miami to be ranked in the top 5. I also wasn't expecting them to be 20. And I just look at
Yeah.
this as like you said, we went over individual names of people, but if we look at the entire body of work of what UM's issue was looking to improve. They had this generational offense last year that was the greatest in school history and one of the most prolific in college football. The numbers are comparable to 2019 LSU. That's how good the offensive numbers were.
Yeah.
Miami's 3 losses were because of the historically one of the worst defenses in program history. When you look at what they've done in the offseason, their offense went down a little bit only because of some of the production numbers, but all of the right pieces are still there. They got a quarterback that everybody was salivating over in the SEC that if he went anywhere else, they would say, "Oh my God, they're a national front runner."
Yeah.
So that's what you have offensively. So you went from being once in a generation to statistically really freaking good to a defense that by all, purposes of when you look at across the line of roster and like what they've accumulated in the secondary, it's significantly better. You went from having a secondary that could not defend in zone and very barely was able to line up properly to now having a team that looks like they have shut down corners and very physical safeties. So it sounds like your defense went from being historically bad to average at this
Yeah.
point.
Or at least competitive. Okay, let's use the word
Right.
competitive, right? Like
Right.
let's call a spade, right? Yeah, we were abysmal on the defensive side. So what do? We
Right.
fired our defensive coordinator, hired all new coaches, brought in all new players. So if at worst we won't be that bad, but we could be maybe a little bit better, if not
Yeah.
wholeheartedly overhauled, right?
Yeah.
Then you follow the others of the breadcrumb that okay, Cam Ward did what he did last season, right? It's clear, and yes, again, generational quarterback, generational talent, incredible. But it's also a system we put him in because if the system was broken, Cam probably wouldn't have done as well, right? But Cam plus the system equaled the results we got right on the field. So now you're going to replace it with I think, just as competent. I'm not saying as talented, but as competent of a quarterback and Carson Beck, who, by the way, last year was a front runner for the Heisman. Fun fact, until he literally had no O line, no running game, and his receivers led the country in drops. So I mean, everyone wants to blame him for not developing or not panning out to being a Heisman contender, but you got to look at who's around him. Now you're going to put him behind one of the best top 5 offensive lines in the country. You're going to give him probably one of the best top 5, top 10 running back rooms in the country. And then you're going to surround him with some pretty decent wide receiver talent. If not, worse comes to worse, you're going to say good with veterans backing them up, right? Because like we don't know what the depth chart is going to look like. A lot of people say it could be a lot of young kids with the people that they brought in the transfer portal being backups and being veterans to help coach up those kids. Some people have it flipped in the exact inverse where they say all those guys that we're bringing in from the transfer portal, whether it's CJ Daniels or the guy from BYU or the guy from Cincinnati, that they're going to start. Either way, my point is you're not losing. And here's the other thing. Like let me rewind this even more. How many people were talking about um, Xavier Restrepo last year at this time?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
How many people were talking about Arroyo at this time last year? And look at those
Nobody.
guys. I mean, Restrepo should have been drafted. I think the whole debacle with the combine it's so ludicrous. But God blessed him, and now he gets to play with his quarterback and can really shine now. But like you're talking about like the most successful wide receiver at Miami in the history of Miami. And then you're talking about an incredible tight end, right? Who was developed here at Miami. And then people are even think, by the way, people think Lofton, who our current tight end is, they think his ceiling's even higher than Arroyo's.
Yep.
So it's like, I just don't understand how you know these things, but yet you still put Miami at 20. You still have God knows what's going on at Auburn. I mean, Hugh Freeze has got cancer. Poor guy. Like, yeah, I wish nothing bad against him, but he's got a QB dilemma. He has no idea who he's going to scar. He's got like 3 or 4 guys in his QB room right now that are literally all have the same opportunity. You have a team that we blew out in the Gators ahead of us, and then you have a team in Notre Dame who literally lost a lot of their key players to the portal and their quarterback, who by the way was average. It wasn't even good, and their 2 quarterbacks who are coming in now are definitely not him. They're not Leonard Riley. Like if you could
Yep.
tell Notre Dame, hey, you can get 1 year of Leonard Riley, one more year of Leonard Riley, or these two guys, they're
Riley Leonard.
Riley Leonard, right?
You got the first name switched because these guys are their
Exactly.
two first names.
Exactly. But like if you could bring him back for next year or start one of the two they have now, they're gonna bring him back, which means that these guys are not as good. So it's
Yep.
like I just it's funny how people can say one thing and then do another. And I'm like, I just am not seeing any consistency here. Because like I said, again, I'm not
True.
saying our depth chart is top tier and we're gonna win the ACC this year definitively and make it to the college football playoff and get into the semis. That's not what I'm saying, but I definitely think we're still competitive. Are we going to be as electric as we were last year? No, but do I think we'll be more consistent? Absolutely. That's what I think, and I think that's the more important thing to talk about when it comes to the rankings is how consistent are you?
Yep. I couldn't agree more. It's such a joke
It,
when
it,
you
it
see some of these
I
people
love it though.
through.
You know, again, I don't take it seriously because it's what are we in May? Yeah, it's May. We still
Yeah.
got all of summer. We still got the fall to get through. God knows what happens. I'm praying for no injuries. You know what I mean for anyone, but we'll see. It's always fun to talk about to see where people are kind of viewing everything. I think it's important too to always look at these things post portal because you don't even know who your roster is going to look like until the spring ends. So, Rudy, we have made it. We've gotten to the end of the show. Another one in the books. Thank you for watching, y'all. Until next week, be good, y'all. Win the weekend. And as always, go Canes.